Over the years, I have ridden 1,033 different roller coasters, 155 of which were made of wood. I have ridden wooden coasters in 33 different US states and 11 different countries. This will be a two-part video series counting down the top 50 wooden roller coasters I have ever ridden. Remember, this list is my opinion, and everyone will rank rides differently. Before going into the list, I want to mention that I prioritize more than anything airtime, pacing, and a great setting. Starting off at number 50 is Big Dipper at Camden Park. The stats on this coaster are not super impressive. The ride is roughly just 45 feet or 13 meters tall, but the ride is on here for two reasons. One, the restraints, or lack thereof. This ride has just buzz bars and no seatbelts. Two, the second drop. This is one of the best drops on any coaster, as it provides some terrifying standing ejector airtime in the back two cars. But that might be because even the train gets airtime. Just look. The ride is smoother than you'd expect when you see what it looks like. The final turn has some strong laterals. The drop out of the tunnel gives a really strong pop of airtime, as does the entrance into the brake run. Number 49. Another Big Dipper, this one at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. I went into this coaster with very low expectations. All I knew was that it had a very picturesque turn above the station. What I didn't know was that the ride had 3 drops with some crazy airtime, and you only had lap bars, no seatbelts. The first 2 drops were parabolic, and when you reach the steepest part of the drop, back car riders are launched skywards. The turnaround section is a bit bumpy, but it has a lot of near misses with the park's other attractions. And then the return run kicks things off with a sizable drop with another strong burst of airtime, and then some smaller pops on the bunny hills. Just make sure to ride this one in the back. The 3 drops had the strength of Connie It's a Blue Streak, but the ride wasn't as horrifically rough. Number 48, Classic Coaster at the Washington State Fair. This is yet another coaster with just lap bars and no seatbelts. Well, unless you ride in the very back, where there's a super loose seatbelt, but it's there for a reason. The ride starts slow with an okay double down, but the drop off the first turnaround is insane. Just look at the type of airtime you get. It's standing airtime combined with some spectacular laterals. The following drop's airtime is very strong as well. The rest of the ride is very smooth, with a few smaller pops of airtime along the way, but those 2 aforementioned drops make the ride. 47. Giant Dipper at Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. Of all the coasters on this list, Giant Dipper is the trickiest to rank because it has been the longest since I last rode it. However, I remember the coaster being remarkably smooth for its age and having several drops in the back row that gave good airtime. Number 46. Kentucky Flyer Kentucky Kingdom. Often overshadowed by Lightning Run and Storm Chaser, Kentucky Flyer is yet another airtime machine. This one is more geared towards families, but every hill will pop you up out of your seat. I do think it's the weakest of the Gravity Group Junior Woodies, since it has the most basic layout, but it's still quite fun and very smooth. Number 45. Oscar's Wacky Taxi at Sesame Place. This ride is the reason I have no shame going to Sesame Place. Oscar's Wacky Taxi may be small in size, but it's just one airtime hill after another. The airtime isn't very sustained, and outside of the drops off the turnarounds, the airtime is a bit weaker than the other Junior Gravity Group Woodies, but the ride is relentlessly paced and doesn't give you a moment to catch your breath. Number 44. Wooden Warrior Quasi. The original Junior Gravity Group wooden coaster caught everyone off guard with its great airtime. This ride isn't paced as frenetically as Oscar's Wacky Taxi, but I give it the edge since the airtime is more sustained, particularly on the ride's larger drops in the first half. Plus, this ride is still impeccably smooth after almost a decade of operation. Number 43. Switchback at ZDT's amusement park. The world's only shuttle wooden coaster is an interesting ride for sure. This ride has several near misses because it's a borderline miracle Gravity Group found a way to fit this ride into the already cramped park. The outward leg has some good airtime, particularly the second hill that offers sustained floater airtime throughout the whole train, and the following speed hill that gives everyone a quick and strong pop of airtime. But the ride's unique element is the backward segment. You get some weightlessness on the spike, and while the airtime isn't as strong as the first half due to the reduced speed, you still get this free-falling sensation on the drops, and taking a 90-degree turn backwards is quite disorienting. Number 42. Twister at Grona. Like Switchback, Gravity Group deserves a lot of credit for fitting this into Grona Lund. And as the name suggests, this coaster has a complex layout that wraps around itself, and I couldn't memorize it even after multiple re-rides. Most of these smaller junior Gravity Group coasters focus on little bunny hills, but Twister's drops are a bit larger, and if you ride in the back, you get about a half dozen strong pops of airtime. Number 41, Twister at Knoebels. Most of the coasters on this list will focus on airtime, but Twister is a notable exception. Twister is the perfect complement to Phoenix, focusing more on strong laterals and an unpredictable layout. But there still are some airtime moments, such as the first drop if you're in the back, and the first turnaround is great in every row, same with the finale. I know Twister has run a bit bumpy at points, but was running like a dream in 2020. Number 40, Troy at Toverland. Considered by many to be the best GCI, I was a bit underwhelmed by Troy, but it was still a good ride. The first half had some larger elements, although the airtime wasn't as good here as I expected, while the second half had the more abrupt pops of airtime you typically see on the twisted GCI layouts. Number 39, Wodan Timbur Coaster at Europa Park. This coaster felt similar to Troy. It also had larger elements at the start, before progressing to the more abrupt pops of airtime later in the ride. But I give it the slight edge for the far superior theming, particularly in that queue line. Wodan does run a bit bumpy towards the back, but I prefer it in the front row anyway. Number 38, Grand National at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. This was a love-hate coaster for me. On one hand, I loved the racing element, and this coaster had some serious airtime in the back car on almost every drop. However, the ride has some downright brutal valleys, making it hard to ride consecutively. With some TLC, this coaster could possibly make the top 20, if not higher. Number 37, Blue Streak at Cedar Point. The layout is simple. It's a basic out and back, but the ride offers some good airtime on each and every hill. The ride does get a bit bumpy as you move towards the back of the train, but the money seat is up front anyway for the smoothness and best airtime. Number 36, Wild One at Six Flags America. This coaster feels similar to Blue Streak with two notable differences. 1, the ride runs much smoother. 2, Wild One has a great helix at the end with some wonderful laterals to complement all the airtime you experienced earlier in the ride. I also have a fondness for this ride because it used to be 15 minutes from my parents' house growing up when it ran at Paragon Park. Number 35, Wood Express at Parc St. Paul. Another small Gravity Group on this list, Wood Express is a longer, taller, and more aggressive version of Oscar's Wacky Taxi. I only got 2 rides on it due to it having a delayed opening and me needing to leave to catch my flight, but the ride had strong pacing, and every single hill delivered some great pops of airtime. Number 34, Tonnerre de Zeus at Parc Asterisk. I want to begin by saying I rode this coaster in 2019 in early April. If you watch a POV from that year versus past years, it's not running as fast as it used to. That being said, Tonnerre de Zeus still had some very strong moments of airtime. 3 of the first 4 drops deliver ejector airtime, rivaling the Raven's 5th drop. And then the 540-degree helix on the second turnaround offered laterals comparable to the Legend at Holiday World. But the coaster has a serious pacing problem. Those bunny hills in the middle of the ride looked like they should give some great airtime, but they offered hardly any, and the ride limped to the finish line. There was still 1 or 2 surprise moments along the way that gave you a little bit of airtime, but if this ride ran to its full potential, it would be a borderline top 10 wooden coaster for me with its length and that start. Number 33, Texas Stingray at SeaWorld San Antonio. Like the prior coaster, I need to begin with a disclaimer. I rode Texas Stingray in about the least favorable conditions possible. Temperatures were in the low 50s, and the ride actually closed down due to cold temperatures by the end of the night. So this ranking is the ride's absolute floor in my opinion, and I suspect it would run faster on a hot summer day, which is crazy because the ride already hauled from start to finish. The first half has some good airtime, particularly on the first drop in the very back, because it's a rare straight drop by GCI, and then the turnarounds give strong pops of airtime up front. However, the second half's airtime was noticeably weaker. That's where I think the ride could improve when the ride warms up. but it still ran smooth as a new coaster should, and it felt way faster than its posted speed. Number 32, Joris and the Draak at Efteling. One of the biggest surprises of my Netherlands trip was Joris. I expected this to be one of the weaker GCIs, but it rode like your typical GCI, offering quick pops of airtime on almost every hill. Now the reason it places so high of some of the other GCIs is the racing element. It's executed as well as Lightning Racer, and it created some really cool visuals. But unlike Lightning Racer, this coaster actually has a dynamic and exciting layout. Plus it's still running smooth. Number 31, Thunderhead at Dollywood. Because of the retracking it received in the past few years, Thunderhead is now among my favorite GCIs. It used to be quite bumpy, but now it rides like a brand new GCI. The ride holds its speed well start to finish, and it's yet another instance of a GCI that offers one quick pop of airtime after another while weaving around itself. Number 30, Comet at Great Escape. Prior to 2019, this coaster would have been in my top 15 or top 20, but it was running really slow in 2019. I'm hoping that was just an anomaly. Great Escape typically does a really good job maintaining this classic wood coaster, and it's a long ride with an endless series of airtime hills. And those hills mix it up between floater airtime and shorter, more aggressive pops of airtime. And there are some laterals as well on the unbanked turnarounds. Number 29, Cornball Express at Indiana Beach. This is yet another coaster with those glorious PTC buzz bars, and the result is some wonderful airtime. I know a lot of people prefer this coaster up front, but this is unequivocally a back row ride for me. Several drops give flagector to ejector airtime in the back, and you also have a helix with some decent laterals. The only knock I have on this coaster is that the ride does feel slow, particularly in between elements. Number 28, Raven at Holiday World. This coaster may be short, but it packs a punch. The ride has a few drops with some good airtime, most notably the incredible 5th drop that delivers some of the strongest airtime on any traditional wood coaster. And then the ride is paced incredibly well. There is a brief lull after the Lake Rudolph turn, but after the 5th drop, Raven tears through the woods on the finale, and it feels completely out of control, offering laterals and a little bit of airtime too. The ride does have some rough spots, but it's still very re-rideable to me, and I fully expect Holiday World will smooth out those rough patches as they typically do. Number 27, Gold Striker at California's Great America. Based on my 2014 rides, this would have been in my top 15. When I rewrote it in 2018, Gold Striker was still as fast-paced as ever and still a blitz of airtime. It's faster and wilder than your typical GCI, but it was running quite bumpy and it gave me a headache after a few rides, and that was kind of unfortunate because I really like this layout. That being said, I still think the pacing and that layout is enough to keep it almost in my top 25 even when it was running rough. Number 26, Legend at Holiday World. This may be the king of laterals. Legend has that famous double helix, but there are also several other turns that will slam you against the side of the train as well. Mix in a wonderful setting through the woods and a few other solid airtime hills, namely the 4th hill and return run, and you have a very well-rounded coaster. I just can't quite put it in my top 25 because of my personal preference for airtime, and all the coasters in my top 25 do have superior airtime moments. So those are my 50 through 26th ranked wooden roller coasters. Check back tomorrow for my top 25 wooden roller coasters, or if you're watching this later, I'll include a link to the next video. What are your thoughts on any of the coasters on this list? I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate if you gave it a like, and you considered subscribing, because there'll be a lot more roller coaster and amusement park videos here at Canobie Coaster. Thanks for watching.